it's December 1st, 2016, and we are about to undertake this new subframe graft. You can see that this is obviously not the original front end that was on this car in 1940. My dad in the late 90s did this subframe graft with one of his buddies, and it didn't quite turn out right. Left the car sitting too high in the front. We put in Hotchkiss 2-inch lowering springs, and it still didn't really set right. So instead of cutting this one off and using the drum brakes on this subframe, we just decided to get a whole new subframe. This subframe was also narrowed 4 inches because at some point someone mismeasured, and that actually made it a little bit too tight in here, so it would have been really hard to fit headers or manifolds with the steering box right here and the small block in there. So we're just scrapping this whole front end, or not scrapping it, but cutting it out, use it for something else. So I'll show you guys sort of how to do a subframe graft. It's a lot of thinking, a lot of measuring, but you know, it's a big upgrade from a straight axle. You can get disc brakes. Now you can see, if you look closely on this frame, it has this straight, basically a straight. There's a little bit of drop down in the middle of this frame, that's just stock. Anyways, straight subframe, there's no Z in it or nothing like that. So now if you look over here, this is another Nova subframe. This one has the Z in it. So it's kind of counterintuitive, but if the front goes up, the back has to go down. So this gives it a little bit more drop. I think I calculated about 4 inches of drop. So now I just got to figure out where exactly to cut and splice all this. Now you can see right in here that this is just over 4 inches wide at the spot where I want this spindle to be. I'm measuring based off this grease zert on the ball joint. So it's about 4 inches wide back here. Now if you look on this frame, because it's 1940 frame, it's obviously much different. Maybe you can't see, but this frame is only 2.5 inches wide. So what they did last time was they took this and spliced it, and then they slid it down, narrowed it, made it all fit. So you can see there's some metal work in here. They did a good job in it back in the day, but their measurements were just off, so now I get to redo it. Now another important thing to note of the Nova subframe versus a Camaro subframe, of some years anyways, you can see that the steering box is actually what they call a rear steer, because the steering box and the drag link is behind the crossmember. Now you can get a lot of these subframes, like the 78 Camaros and whatnot, where the steering box is actually way up here. Well, that's fine if you have a big long front clip like a pickup or something else, but on this one the front clip only comes out to here. So a lot of times if you use one of those subframes like a Camaro subframe, you actually have the steering box here, and you have to cut out or make your fenders kind of work around the steering box, and it looks all sorts of goofy. Also with the rear steer, it's a little bit better because you're not going to hit something and have the drag link hit. It'll just be the frame instead of the steering rod. So that's one of the benefits of a rear steer setup. Now these are very common in the 68 to 74 Novas, and they just unbolt on the Nova. It's just a subframe that goes back, and then there's like another section on the Nova, and then a lot of people use a subframe connector. Anyways, so that's what we're doing. Nova subframe, easy to find parts for, and that's that. So the hardest part of doing a subframe swap is actually deciding how much of a Z you need. So you need to figure out where you're going to set your front end basically. So what I did here, this is the old subframe that's on there, so I just basically set this, the front tins on here, and got a couple bolts just in the place to kind of hold it, so you can see an idea of how high it's going to be. This is a 4.5 inch drop from what it was. So all I did obviously is I took off the wheels. You can see the drums are almost on the ground, they're about 1 inch off, but I got it set where I wanted, and then I measured. And I actually used some 6-inch 4x4s to hold this frame into place. Now I put these 4x4s behind where the subframe is going to go. So if I leave those 4x4s there, I can actually cut off the front, and then I can slide the new one in and then tack it up, and then I can start tweaking it, make sure it's square, and then form it all in nice with steel. But this is the easiest way to get it set and not have to mess with it. Just get something set here. You could use a jack stand too, obviously. You do not want to use a regular jack to hold your position, because jacks will settle overnight. The hydraulic pressure, you lose pressure overnight, and it does settle. This subframe has stock springs in it, and I'm going to set it up with the stock height springs. And if I need to get it lower, I can put in those Hotchkiss lowering springs that are in the front there. I'm also going to put the engine on here, and maybe a couple sandbags to kind of simulate how much this would weigh up front. And then I just chop the subframe on that, line it up with this, Yeah, it's a lot it's a lot easier to say than it is to do, but that's what I'm gonna do. So that's that. Subframe swap. Woohoo! So I get this subframe cut down to the approximate length, and I did leave it a little long on purpose, just so I can kind of measure based off of this point back to this point and cut down accurately a little bit at a time till it gets to my desired length, which I wrote down here, as you can tell, and the outside lined up, roughly lined up. So I cut on this frame where it was the same width as the subframe, because this frame goes back at a taper and then back. So where I cut it did make a difference. It was intentional. So then I will cut this down, tack it, get it square, plate it up, weld it up, and yeah, that's that on that. Also, another thing important of note here is the angle of the front arms of the frame. So I could have elected to bring this to the bottom side of the frame, so that would in turn affect the angle of this and the angle of your engine, etc. So we're gonna measure from this point here across to that point on the A-arm, and then the same from the other side over to here. So you want to give me the end of the tape, Pop?
Well,
the dumb end.
Bracket's going to get in the way. To the center of it's 44 1/4.
Okay.
44 3/4.
Yeah, so it's half an inch off, so we gotta...
So it's 1/4 of an inch off.
Yeah, 1/4 of an inch off, okay. Okay, so now I'm gonna cut these tacks. And this side is...
Why? Why do you have to cut the tacks? Why can't you just push this side over?
It's welded together.
You get this side tacked?
Yeah. So right here you can see that I'm just forming this in. Basically all I did was I pie cut it, made it flush back, tacked it up, and now I can weld it, clean it up and weld it, and then I'll add some more gussets and then plate over all of it. So right here you can see I have some abrasives and some rusty metal. Now this is about 10 gauge, I believe. Now what I did was I laid out my pieces. Obviously it's worth your time to lay these out, to use your resources as best possible. I first started with just a pneumatic grinder with one of these Keen small cut wheels on it, and the air ones are actually a little bit easier to handle because they're more variable speed versus the electric ones, which is right here, which has this style cut off on it. This is a Black Hawk abrasives. So I start with the air one because it's more accurate, and then when I have my distinct line cut, I can then switch to the electric and it's much faster. So then I take it, cut them out, right, And you can start off with one of these, just a 40 grit. I ordered these through Empire Abrasives. They have them through 3M, a whole bunch of different companies. They're just like the quick disconnect style, or quick connect, whatever you want to call them. Quick change. And then I hit it with this strip disc. Now these are kind of cool. You can use these on a lot of body parts, and they don't take off any metal. All they do is take off paint, which is nice. See, that's these. These are by Black Hawk Abrasives also. They're kind of expensive, but they work for a long time, and they're really nice for giving you a final finish. So here are the pieces that I cut out. As you can see, they're a lot less rusty. So that's kind of how I'm saving money here, just using steel I had. I have a new sheet of steel over here that I bought. This was 30 bucks. I mean, it takes more time to clean up the rusty metal, but I like to use rusty stuff. Just get it out of the garage, use it up, and then just to lay them out. It's just like any other type of process. I use tag board. You can buy this from Walmart, obviously. It's nice because you can just shape it with the scissor instead of trying to cut out metal and whatnot. And then another thing that comes in handy is we have a bunch of these old magnets. I don't know, we've had these for a long time. So I use these and I can magnet the tag board onto the piece. You can also use vice grips or really anything else just to kind of fit stuff up. Now here's my subframe graft. You can see that I have these cover plates over the top of it now. The reinforcing plates are going to be boxed all the way around. The welds look pretty good. I have it welded as many places as I can. At the top here I had to actually shape it. You can see that the inside side of the frame there is lower, so I actually had to shape the metal a little bit for that. Now I just have to do the bottom side. So you can see there's my seam where I welded the two things together. And then obviously I'm going about 5 inches on each side and boxing all around it. I think it turned out pretty decent. I'm not going to even weld or grind the welds down just because it's just a waste of time anyways. So that's how I did that. I'm pretty happy with it. It's really strong. It's going to be the strongest part of the frame by far. So I'm excited. Once I get this bottom piece welded on, I can drop this thing down and start setting up the front tins, and we see how low she sits now. Fucking right, bud. Oh yeah, and I cut out this brace once it's all done welded. Hell yeah, man. Now I got this all welded up, and it's sitting on the ground, and she's sitting purty. You can already tell it's gonna be a huge difference from what it was. And then it'll drop another inch or two with the engine in there, and probably another inch with all the tins and everything else. So it'll be right on the nuts, I'm thinking. If I need to go any lower, I got some Hotchkiss lowering springs I can throw in there, but I don't think I'm gonna have to. So it's gonna be pretty freaking dope. The splice turned out really nice. Might be hard to see, but it turned out nice. Got a nice transition up. It's extremely strong. So now I gotta take this and I'm gonna chop these ends off and cap them because I don't need this much extra weight or this much extra frame up front. Start with the body, work my way forward with the tins, starting with the core support, and go from there. Obviously lining up the body lines is the most important part of this process, so that's that, man. Turned out good.